And then you hear a very loud child in the back screaming, singing the whole thing. Not like a metal show, but like he is belting it. And it's me just yelling the song out. Everyone was just laughing. And it's like, I think that says a lot about who I am as a performer. Just go all out, floor it, mono red, just do it. My influence, I think, is more that we brought people to the fact that this is the best board game in the world. At the end of it, I'm just glad that more people are able to connect through Magic. It's good to have outlets where we can practice how to be social and how to enjoy time with other people and create a positive play group or whatever it is. And that, to me, is like the real takeaway from the whole board game D&D Critical Role game nights revolution that's happened over the past 8 years.
Jimmy Wong is a mega talent. He's an actor, performer, songwriter, and mainstay on the Command Zone, one of Magic's biggest YouTube channels. I was fortunate enough to sit down with Jimmy and have a fun conversation about life, Magic, parenthood, and everything in between. Enjoy. All right, today on Humans and Magic, I am here with someone who needs almost no introduction.
That's not
someone who is incredibly articulate, well-spoken. Makes me nervous wanting to talk to him because he's just got so many thoughts. But I am here with Jimmy Wong. Jimmy, how are you?
Oh, I'm good. That was a nice intro. You didn't tell me you were going to drop a banger of a compliment.
I just thought about doing that 5 seconds ago. So nice. At least for intros, like I'm pretty spontaneous. But how are you? Are you in LA right now or?
Yep, I live in Los Angeles. I just came back, though. I was in Tokyo for 2 weeks. It was amazing. I also dropped down and went to Osaka. But I just got back stateside, and then I went to MagicCon Philly, and finally, all the way back around, I've arrived back at home.
So much to unpack there. But what was your favorite thing about Japan this time around? I assume it's not your first rodeo in Japan.
It's my second trip, and each time I've taken 2 weeks there, which I think is the perfect amount of time to experience a country like Japan. There's so many things to choose from. I think I enjoyed the people more than anything else this time around. Before I was like, oh my gosh, Ghibli Museum. Oh my gosh, all my favorite things everywhere around me. Video games, endlessly, Magic cards. But I enjoyed the people this time around because everyone in Japan, there's just this is true in a lot of countries. It's not just Japan, but Japan, I think, is particularly got respect as one of its top tier things to exemplify and to demonstrate. And so you don't hear cars honk at each other when you're in Tokyo, even though it's crowded or even if someone doesn't happen to see a red light turn green or whatever. And people like very much enjoy their jobs, it seems, or at least enjoy being a representative in their job and helping do the thing that their job is supposed to be about. So there's a lot of just respect everywhere. And as a result, it's a big difference than America, where there's very little respect. I've had so many people in stores get angry at me for just perusing sometimes. Now, obviously, this is not the case everywhere. That would be crazy. But I think America, we're very much just a me country. And so you don't see that. People usually hate their jobs. They don't love it, or they don't have, this is my job, this is a duty, and I will fulfill it to the best of my ability. Like that idea, I think, is not as present in American culture. Yeah,
I mean, the few times I've been to Japan, even going to a 7-Eleven, even just getting something on the street, there's just this sort of care and craft that goes into every part of that society. And I want to say that people are kind of forced into it because, if you grow up, if you're Japanese and you grow up into it, you're kind of forced into it, right? Because you can't just kind of have crappy standards and then your business is not going to be around the next day. But
true,
whatever the reasons for it are, there's something we could learn from that, right? It's almost like there's a spectrum of like pure professionalism, maybe Japanese way, and I don't give a fuck about like my job at all, and I can't wait.
Person
to
at
leave
McDonald's
today.
making $6 an hour and having to pay $3,000 for rent. Yeah, I get why they're angry.
yeah, there's a bit of that, but I always feel like there's something we could learn from Japanese society. But I mean, having said that, like, what do you think are there things that you don't particularly enjoy about being in Japan? Like, I don't know. You've only been a tourist for two weeks, but
Yeah, yeah. And I love how I've just gone from adoring people in Japan to now I'm just going to start pooping on them. No,
well, you gotta
I think
have ups and downs.
yeah, I mean, it's true. I mean, if you travel a lot everywhere, it's just ups and downs. And then at the end of it, you kind of weigh all of them together because it takes a while to unpack mentally what happened. And you go like, because you have to like compare time too, like time here versus time there. I think the other big thing in Japan is shame. And so that is a reason also that drives respect. And I'm not saying this is like a thing I didn't enjoy about Japan. I have gone to Asian countries enough to, I think, to like get a pretty good idea of the major ones. I haven't traveled to like Vietnam or Thailand or any of those yet. Or I really want to go to the Philippines too, because I think they all have their different flavor of what their culture is about. Shame is present in all of them, by the way, as it also is in American culture. It's everywhere. But I think in Japan, it takes a particular, like, I don't know, it's like a very sharp knife in a lot of ways. It cuts deep, and it's also beautiful because it's a really beautiful knife. So there's like this interesting, I don't know how to describe it otherwise, right?
Yeah.
It's like if you think about Japanese food, all of it is this wonderful, like sushi is just like a perfect handmade thing that's crafted top to bottom. You know, it's got absolute certainty in it. And the way that they do a lot of their tech design and a lot of their engineering follows a lot of that same idea. But shame is really present there also in different ways because of the ways that there's a lot of censorship in different ways. There's also just a lot of like, no, you don't talk about that, or you don't do that, and you don't do it like that because other people will look at you and they won't outright say like, hey, don't do that, but you'll feel like you're doing something shameful or wrong or disrespectful. So there's an energy there too that has that. And that obviously is something you find in other places, but Japan, again, particular flavor is kind of like that.
Yeah. I was interviewing this Japanese professional basketball player who grew up in Hawaii, kind of like Josh. And he was just talking about how hard it was to live in Japan because,
interesting.
Because, well, he's 6'9" as well. So he said, I wouldn't expect it, but I mean, I'm not that tall. But, just getting stares and just, I think a grandma, gave him the stink eye because he was a little bit too loud on the subway. So there's a lot of,
for sure, yeah,
a lot of those norms, right? Because like the Japanese public transit is just immaculate. Like, but
great.
It has its downsides too. Like you can't actually answer calls, right? Because like you'll disturb the person next to you. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. And that's probably why my wife noted that it's like Japan also has a very strict immigration. It's not easy to become a citizen there. And it's equal parts them saying like, no, you do not meet the qualifications to live here in a respectful way that will allow you to coalesce with society and function with our society. And just like, they don't want to bring in new people, even though their population is going down and stuff. But I think they're still holding on to that cultural part of it, which makes sense. Yeah. I think like, once you do let the doors wide open, you see all the results and all around the world. You have tons of case studies in every part of the world what happens when immigration is totally allowed and immigration is strictly limited.
For sure. And do you have any idea what Japanese internet is like? I mean, in terms of like the communities, because I know you've been very...
Oh, no, not very much.
I'm curious how shame and the societal construct works in the context of that. Like, do people just not argue online? Like, I have no idea. I'm just curious if you do.
You do see, if you go on like Twitter when you're in Japan, you'll get just a bunch of characters that I can't read, and it's something's trending, and you click it, and I don't understand any part of it. But I would assume that there is some amount of relation, as social media is definitely, we see how it's shown the humanity of all of us pretty quickly.
Yeah, definitely something I want to talk about more with you. But how was PT? Yeah.
So there's a Pro Tour in Philly as well as a Magic Con. They happened at the same time. I think it's pretty savvy marketing wise to pair them up, because I think the Pro Tour, everyone agreed, was just an absolute win. And seeing someone like Reed Duke take it home too was like, hell yeah, that guy deserves it. Probably about more than anyone else that's a current competitor, to be honest. And then at MagicCon was great too. So Philly was just awesome. We loved the convention. I thought the convention was the best Magic convention I've ever been to. And it was, I think they're still trying to improve it a lot. They get so much feedback, and they took the stuff that they heard from MagicCon Vegas pretty to heart. And they're working also in partnership with a pretty large convention organizer with ReedPop. So I've been to a lot of Repop conventions before, like Penny Arcade Expo. I used to go to the one in Seattle every year. That was always run by Repop, and they do a really good job running big shows. I think they'd never done a Magic show like that before, and so they were also figuring out, what resources do we need to give? How exactly do we need to accommodate in terms of the size of the arenas and where it all is located. So I think they learned a lot, and the con as a result was a lot better. And you could tell Wizards was like, we need to have more open play areas and not have anything like that happen to us on social media. Probably that's my gauge of it. But there's still like a paid command zone area and stuff. And I think that was the number one piece of feedback overall, was like, we don't need a paid command zone area. It's completely against the idea, but they'll probably keep doing it, knowing how things work.
Yeah, what's the sentiment? Are they gonna? It feels like they probably would not abolish it, but maybe just offer different options over time, right?
I think, yeah, if you're going to do it, then have it be like, we have judges on hand for high level CEDH games. We have the ability to play, if you want to, for like some fun kind of, everyone adds a booster pack to their deck, or like in this variant, we're going to give you the plane chase cards to play with, like stuff like that, and all the tokens that you'll need, stuff like that would make the experience actually feel like a curated Magic one, as opposed to where I think it was originally conceived of as like, there's a lot of tables here, people will be drafting and doing all this stuff, and we need to set aside an area for the Commander players. But it quickly just became a monetized thing, and then that, I think, took precedent over, like, why is it a Commander area? Because people will just sit anywhere and play Commander until they're told to leave.
Yeah. Give me 1 second. I'm going to shut the door so my cat will not continue to disturb us.
I want to see the cat. Oh, yeah.
My apologies. So
you live in Shanghai and have a cat as well?
I got 2 cats.
Wow. Who takes care of them when you travel?
Okay, funny story. So when when we met in LA, I did North America, the cats came with us.
Wow.
That was an epic undertaking, to be honest. Like, just my wife really wanted our cats to come because we were going to be out of China for a month. And it was just like, yeah, let's just do all the paperwork, get all the shots, go through all the rigmarole. And so right now, I guess now our cats have gone to 3 countries. So,
wow.
Yeah, that's something that I would never, ever want to ever do again. I don't have kids, but I imagine this is probably what that feels like, except that with cats, it's probably arguably worse because they're animals and you have to take them across borders and stuff like that.
Yeah, animals have a whole line of regulatory whatever, I'm sure, to make sure that you're not bringing in some rat that's going to take over the population of rats in America or something.
Yes. And the really funny thing is that China has been very strict about like bringing animals into the country. So we were just stressing about like doing
bringing
all the paperwork,
them back.
And bringing them back. It was actually easy to get them into Canada, into the US, but coming back was the challenging part. We paid out the nose for these exams and tests and like papers. But funny thing is when we landed back in China, like nobody even batted an eye. We just took them right outside the airport and, don't ask, don't tell kind of thing. So,
yeah, sounds about right. Also, I guess it just depends on who's working that day.
Exactly.
That's how it goes.
Yeah, not to make it too much about it, but like we also came back in February, which was a time when things were relaxed a lot more COVID wise in China. So
for the first time, I think people just 3 years or whatever.
Yeah, I think people just wanted to. The authorities just wanted to take a break, maybe. So we were lucky. Yeah.
Nice. Well, next time you travel with your cats, just time it around that again.
Yes. It was insane. I hadn't personally been outside of mainland China for 3 years. So when I met you in
oh wow,
in LA, and also when I went back home to Vancouver, Canada, where I'm from, like I had not been back to those places since pre-COVID. So it was really, really freaking nice, right?
Nice, yeah.
Like, yeah.
There's a lot of good times out there. Well, I'm glad you were able to stop by our office and say hi then. That was a lot of fun.
Yes, it was a lot of fun. And did you manage to get all your taxes done?
My taxes? What, man?
I remember we were chatting, and you were also working on your taxes at the time on your laptop.
Yeah, that's
Sorry
actually,
if that's like too private.
No, it's a nonstop thing is the problem with taxes, because there's always something that has to get done. And then there's always another pile of data that you realize no one's been accounting for, and someone needs to mark down what was what and why it happened. Because taxes, I've done a lot of looking at tax forms recently as well because of withholding, which is like a whole, I don't know if you know what withholding is, and dependent and all that stuff. But the government gives me a whole $2,000 every year for having a baby. $2,000. Bless their hearts. Yeah. So you're marking now. Whenever this
is like a state of California thing, or it's
a U.S. thing. I think it came into play a little whiles back, and it's just been like a policy since. In the idea that being like we need to support families as they're raising a child. It's difficult. It's actually kind of nice. I wish it was more, but it would make sense why it's also at $2,000, considering how big the country is. So that requires a whole new thing of me writing down like how much do I get, because you mark now a dependent on your tax forms and stuff because your child is your dependent. And then we also have like 5 different options now that I'm married. There's like married filed jointly, married filed separately, head of household. There's a billion things. So yeah, I'm still doing my taxes if that's your question. It's never ending.
It's a nonstop thing. Also, it's probably more challenging because you're a freelancer, right? Like you do things
not
for
anymore. We have moved into the W-2, I think, or W-4, one of them, life where you just get the taxes are prepaid. California is real rough to freelancers. There's a literal self-employment tax on top of everything else that you do.
Okay. The more you know. Like I had a great time in California, but I was telling my wife, who's not from California, like there's a lot of issues with the state. Like, so it's very different visiting versus living, as it always is, right? Kind of like we talked about with Japan. And
I usually tell people that California is like quickly becoming a socialist nightmare, which is like when the good times roll on a little too hard, and then people realize, oh, we're paying a lot to keep the good times rolling, and it's not actually working. Because every major city, and no one's going to deny this at this point in California post-COVID, is just like not in great shape for many different reasons. Here in LA, we saw like homeless people that were just getting literally just torn out of their housing, and because the Oscars had to take place in Union Station, it was just ridiculous. I'm from Seattle. It's gotten real bad in parts of downtown there too. It's just like one of those things that happens, I think, to show the, COVID. What did COVID do? It cracked the veneer on the whole world and went like, where are the weak points? And then all the weak points started to shine through once everything paused. So I think you got to see every country have to deal with whatever their thing. I mean, America's dealt with a lot, I think, since.
Yeah. So correct me if I'm wrong. You're from Washington, but you moved to LA or California basically for professional reasons. Is that right?
Yeah, my brother went to USC and I wanted to be an actor, so I came to LA to where he was at because he already had a network here and all that stuff. I was like, oh, this is convenient. But I grew up in Seattle, so pretty close to where you grew up.
Yeah, yeah. So were it not for Command Zone, let's say that you were like 100% focused on being an actor or being in Hollywood or doing something to that effect. Like, do you feel like now, like in 2023, people still have to be in LA or be in California?
It's tough for us because we do a podcast where showing up on camera is important. It means I need to be there for that part of it, but I don't know. I personally always tell people to not become actors. It's like my go-to whenever I hear anyone is thinking about the career. I feel like you can pretty much make work from home work as long as you are like very diligent about how you handle it. Like you have a process. You are administrative in your approach to work from home. It's not just I'm a work from home and do whatever I want, go wherever I want. Because I was trying to work from home when I was in Japan, and so that meant I had to wake up at 6 a.m. To be awake by 1 p.m. LA time. And so my working hours, I told people here, was like 1 to 9. Like in between those hours, I will respond to things, field things, and manage things as necessary. But that morning period, you can't count me out.
Yeah. How did that work out for you? Like, did it wreck you, or were you okay with it?
It was hard. I stopped kind of doing it like halfway through the trip because it was just like that plus jet lag was just a little too hard to maintain. And then I got full into Japan time, and then I was more like a 3 to midnight kind of person. But then I was trying to go back to it on the way back home because I knew I'd have to readjust to another time zone. So try to just like reverse the process. It's tough. Jet lag is harder on different people than others. And for me, it took like a week, I think, to fully get settled in because I was also doing this work from home thing.
Yeah. I guess my question is more about like if you're an actor, maybe my stereotypical view of that industry is like you have to network, you have to like be in places, right? So
yeah.
No, I totally appreciate the answer in terms of like with respect to what you have now set up, like in terms of command zone, things like that. But just as an actor, like, do you have to be in LA, or is that changing too?
I hope it can eventually change, but no, the networking thing is really important, and it always happens in moments that you don't think about that are more impactful than you might realize. Like it could be I was just out at a bar. Let's just say you're at a bar and you meet your friend Ron there, and Ron is someone that you've worked with in the past, or, you just know. And it just so happens that he mentioned something that he's working on, or some project that's ongoing, or some friend he's meeting that night. You meet that person, and then, cut to a year later. But the effects from having those initial interactions result in you doing more and growing the tree of your relationship and finding other people within that network. And then eventually you get to a point where, hey, I'm just hanging out with this person, it was like Ron's, let's say his ex-business partner is also doing something that you happen to match, and now you guys are just buddy, and you're having a blast together, and, and you're eventually folding Ron back into the mix. So that's just kind of like how the scrum goes down. And you need to be in LA because it's where things are happening. Now, I don't think you need to live in LA proper. You could probably still live 30 minutes to an hour away. But as long as you know how to stay in touch and make sure you go to that friend's birthday and grow your social network, however which way, then it seems like it's still pretty important. It's hard to avoid that, and you can't do that digitally.
Does that just mean every actor or someone in the industry has to be like relatively social? Like you really can't be antisocial because you wouldn't be able to hang out with people, or can you still kind of do it your own in different ways?
You probably still could, but then it just comes down to the quality of your auditions and how you're getting your auditions. Because it's just about, are you going to be seen by the right people at the right time? Because when you're networking, you're making that part of the equation happen. You're trying to go out and find and meet people that are also aspiring maybe for a similar thing. And then you're going to help piggyback on each other's aspirations to get to the point that you want to. And if you're just like, I'm going to study and become the greatest, you're still probably going to get help from your acting coach. Maybe they'll help you out with an audition somewhere or help you connect to one. Your agent has to do a lot of work, especially if you're just like, if you are genuinely you're like Joaquin Phoenix or whatever, and you're just waiting to be discovered. It is only a matter of time, but it's like, is it going to be 5 years or 2 years based on how you handle yourself and move through the industry? Because I think like those types of talents are always looking to be found, and that's the nature of the beast with music as well. And most other people are grinding for it's like in ranked games, how you get to platinum, it starts to get 10% of the players. You go to like diamond, it gets to like 5%. You go to grandmaster or like the about to go pro level or the A-listers basically, and it's like 0.1% or whatever the player base. I think if you're an actor, you're really just trying to play for the top 10%, and that will be enough to like sustain a career. So it's tough. I mean, if you think you want to play for that game, then go for it. If you don't, then I don't know, write something instead. I don't know. Do something where you're in control, because acting a lot of times you're just not in control.
For sure. And how did you get the Mulan role? Like,
just blind sheer luck, I think.
Really? No, I'd imagine
right
you were
place,
like
right
networking
time,
with some person important for like 5 years or something.
I think it was because it was a very large casting call. Like if you were any amount of known Asian in Hollywood, you were probably going to find a way to hear about it. And then it's up to whether or not the casting office sees your picture and resume and goes, yeah, let's bring them in. So at that point, it's more that I'd been building a career and across a bunch of different things. I had some notable credits. I wasn't a nobody. I'd done stuff with Disney before. And I think like, maybe they knew me from the internet. Who knows? There's a lot of different vectors of how someone gauges whether to call you in. And so that was the result of, again, being here for the last decade and just kind of pushing forward and finding those opportunities as they came up.
So you still had to audition, still had to go through the
regular audition. Yeah. It was like, I remember walking into the room and I had the moment where I was like, oh my God, they're all versions of me. or I'm a version of them. And you see the other people walking in and out. You're like, oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, or they were going like Leroy 1, Leroy 2, you know, whatever. And then, one audition, I got a call back like a month or two later. I went back, I did the callback, and at that point, it was the actual director and the executive producer were there, Jason Reed and Nikki Caro. And then you did it for them. They gave you a note, you did it again, and then you walk away and you're like, well, hope they liked it. That was all of 2 minutes of my life that I've been, you know, thinking about for the past 4 months or whatever.
Yeah. Did you still, I mean, I don't know, like where you're at right now, like, do you still get nervous about opportunities or auditions, or you just kind of go in and just knock it out?
Yeah, I find that being nervous doesn't give me much of any help, especially if it's like
there's
anxiety
no edge, right?
nervous where I can't do anything. I'm frozen. I do still get like hyped up and stuff, and my heart's definitely racing, and like a billion things are flying across my brain when I get to the actual thing. Still happens with like live events that I do and stuff too, because we did Game Nights Live at MagicCon Philly, and so that was also like oh man, I'm not stressed or anxious, but I am. There's a lot of adrenaline pumping through me.
I feel like guys like you and Josh have such an awesome unfair advantage, right? Because like coming from a performance background and actually know how to turn things on and off, like I don't mean that in any negative way, like just being able to turn things on, like that is just so, you're just so natural, like in front of a microphone or in front of a camera, and it's just like, it's just unreal. Like it takes years and years, right? It's not just like someone like me, like Joe Schmo, who does a podcast, like can just figure it out, you know?
Yeah, but you ask good questions, so there's a lot of value in that too, because it's like a mental arena you're approaching a person from. I think like if you go back to looking at, I have these like really old videos that my parents filmed when I was in kindergarten or something. We all were dressed as dinosaurs, and we were just singing some sort of like song as a group, and everyone singing like a kid would sing. You know, they kind of got their like voices. They're not, they're not belting it. And then you hear a very loud child in the back screaming, singing the whole thing. Not like a mellow show, but like he's like belting it. He's Adele. And it's me just yelling the song out louder, like with no alertness to how I come off or what. Everyone in the crowd is also just laughing because it's very funny. And to me, I remember like being like, this is the song. I just got to sing it and make sure everyone can hear the notes. Everyone was just laughing. And it's like, I think that says a lot about who I am as a performer, which is just like, that is just go all out, floor it, mono red, just do it.
Were you always super performative as a child? Like, was it like, how was that? Cause I know you have a brother, Freddie, right?
Yep. Yeah, we're both pretty performative, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know where
what was it like growing up together, like in Washington? Like just what was that like?
Pretty goofy, probably. We would like, when we were kids, we would take pool sticks and fight each other, and then Freddie would go and rotoscope lightsabers onto it. So we would like make home movies when we were kids. And he and I were really close in age. We were only like a year and a half apart. So we would always play video games together. We would hang out together. We'd always be in arguments and then instantly make up. So that was like very much like a close sibling relationship. And he and I also both went to the same high school and middle school. So we were in school together for like 8 years. So I think like we were always very close growing up, and then he loved doing videos and kept making movies and stuff into high school and stuff. And I was always there and occasionally jump in and helping, occasionally just living my own life. So I think like having someone else that was always doing stuff in that world also allowed me to continue to explore my own version of it.
Yeah. What about your folks? I mean, did they have anything like a performance background or anything like that? Like how did they influence you, if any?
I think my dad had like played the accordion when he was growing up. My mom is very musical and she can dance, and she was a professional dancer in her early life. So there was definitely an artistic streak that we both inherited, but I don't know about the performance side of it as much. Maybe I'm closer to my mom because my dad kind of tends to keep it in, whereas my mom is a bit more boisterous. Got it.
And you've learned to play instruments or play music like super young, I would expect, right?
Yeah, we did the piano thing. That was our quest as characters in the RPG. So We played a lot of piano, and there was a point where it was like, maybe this could be a professional career piano. And very quickly it was like, no, no, no. We just went to a concert and 3 kids just smoked everyone else. And we're, we're not at the top 0.1%, basically. We were trying to get to top 10% was the idea, I think.
But you were very good, right? You were top 10% or close to that.
I would assume so. The stuff, I watched the video again of me as a kid, and I'm like, mouth to the chin to the floor, like, oh my gosh, look at that kid go, and it's me.
Yeah,
I've lost a lot of that, but I do still love music, so I'm very, very musical still.
I know a lot of people learned to play music when they're younger. I'm just thinking of Asian friends of mine, but they just kind of stopped it entirely. Like, is it just because it was too much, or was it like going to like Catholic school and just like you don't want to have anything to do with it anymore? Like
yeah,
what's the deal with that?
Also, like, not everyone is naturally musical or should be in music. I think it looked out for us because both Freddie and I really like music, and so there was genuine joy and happiness when playing. I could also, like, because music's kind of a rough, if you think about what's happening, you're making someone play the works of a dead person, and you're not trying to put your own expression into it. You're trying to be as good. Actually, the premise is that you will never be as good as them,
right,
and the masters, but you're trying to become as good. And so you already see, like, there's not like, what do you want to do? The very kind of that kind of passion building. It's just like, there is a rigid program here, and this is what you're aspiring to, and this is what you're going to try and work hard for every single day. So imagine not being musical and being subjected to 1 to 2 hours of that every single day of your life. Probably would cause some people to just not care about music, or just to drop it and never need to approach it again.
That is so interesting. I never thought about that. Like, just
I did all the time. As I was playing Mozart, I was like, this is what they did first.
It just pops into your head one day, like when you were a kid. It's just like, I can never top this.
Well, I'd listen to a lot of like Nirvana and Modest Mouse and others, Washington State bands, and that music was I love that stuff. Grunge, rock, just like, Pearl Jam or whatever, Red Hot Chili Peppers. So I think that I could see how cool that was and how that got girls and stuff. And I was not like mad balling to school and everyone's like, dang, look at Jimmy, he's so good at Chopin, holy shit. Like, that was never anything I bragged about to anyone, because it was such a niche thing to me. Like, very few people could appreciate what we were doing at that level unless you had been studying it or, loved piano yourself.
When it comes to music like, Nirvana or others you mentioned, there's a kind of messiness to it, right? Which kind of suggests that it is anti-perfection. So when you were immersed in that music, or maybe learning to play guitar as well at some point, like, did that feel like you could, it's so weird to ask this, but like, do you feel like that's better because you could surpass it somehow? Because it's not about like being a Mozart or a Beethoven,
Yeah. I mean, I guess anyone that wants to be a professional musician treats it like they're trying to become Mozart or Beethoven or whatever, or they aspire for something that's similar. It's like when you're an actor, you're like, maybe I could be Brad Pitt someday. I don't know. I think like music is very difficult to process as a thing for me sometimes, because when I play songs on the guitar, I'm like really bad at memorizing lyrics. I will fumble through songs. I've done live shows where I just mess up like 1 billion times. And that was the exact thing you're not supposed to do when you're playing classical piano. It had to be, 100% getting the S+ was the goal. Mm-hmm. But, you would entertain people still on stage in a show. You would be doing things with the audience. You'd be whatever it is, right? There's a whole layer of live performance that makes it the performance outside of just the music. So I think like when it came to playing music, and it is very messy, like Nirvana and all those, the idea of grunge rock and distorting your guitar so much. I think like I enjoyed that expression. It was just like free. It was so you could, headbang to no one, didn't care if anyone was watching kind of thing. But there's a lot of buttoned up stress with piano.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, things are starting to fall into place in my mind. So very much a leading question, but like how much of video game high school was informed by your actual high school experience?
Oh, so that's interesting because people should know this. I guess it was put out there for a little bit, but when they went to write the characters of my brother's character, who was a teacher at a high school, and then my character, who was one of the students, the writers had lived with me and Freddie. We both lived together in LA for like 2 years at that point. And they were like, we're just going to base this relationship loosely, comedically, off of your real life relationship to Freddie. And so that's
okay, so
why
the premise is that it is an exaggerated version of
it's a
you.
highly exaggerated version where they take it to the absolute limits, of how shitty can a dad be to their kid. And Freddie was a great brother to me, so it's like we just have a very antagonistic back and forth rivalry in a lot of ways. People that listen to his newest podcast, I was a guest on their first season and second season, and the entire vibe is just how funny it is that we're just both just pooping on each other the whole time. So that was like where that came from. And then the high school experience, I think, was like a combination of everyone's high school experiences. And I mean, like my character in VGHS is much more successful with the ladies than my real life self ever was. So I think that was the biggest deviation by far.
Okay, got it. And do you still regularly play music today, like maybe at home or just in certain settings?
I have a guitar I'm looking at that's sitting there. I haven't picked it up in like a month. So no, probably longer than that. I do always end up singing at my kid though. Like I'm beatboxing or just coming up with a song or singing whatever song is on TV. Like all the kid songs, they're constantly stuck in my head. So I think that's my musical outlet right now. It's not really much of an outlet.
Got it. Fatherhood. What's that? What has that journey been like? Like, I don't. How old is your kid now? Are you allowed to say? I have no idea.
Yeah, I'm definitely allowed to say. I have to ask him permission first, but I think.
I mean, okay. I don't know. You some people are. Because you're very thoughtful and intentional about online and like information. Online and things like that. So I wanted to be sure. Yeah.
I think if it's Googleable, then you're okay saying it. So he just turned a year old, so he's like a year and a month now. So about to start walking. Pretty cool. I also don't care so much because like it's not like the wrong people are going to watch this podcast, I guess, unless you got some weirdos in the audience.
No, you're totally right. Like my theory is that if you're actually like 40 minutes into a podcast, like pretty much anything can happen now. Because the people that are just like hate listening or like on the sidelines, they will never make it past the first 15 minutes.
Yeah, they have their own lives to live.
Yeah, exactly. So we can just start. I can just start going crazy
now.
After like an hour or something. But
yeah,
I'm not going to.
I should go back and watch the one you did with Josh to see how crazy it gets 40 minutes in.
Oh no, Josh was immaculate. Like I couldn't disrespect Josh like that. I couldn't do anything crazy on the camera. But but anyways, that was a big.
I love Josh. I love poking fun at him too. Okay, yeah, we're talking about childhood. Not mine, my baby's. Yeah, it's been going good. It changes a man. It changes a human. It changes anyone that has to deal with having a kid. It's crazy out there. I'm so new to having a kid that my experiences sound like a kid eating ice cream for the first time. It's so beautiful. It's so good. Oh my gosh. It's like, be so grateful. But it really is all the things that people stereotype it to be and way more. Like you really don't. I feel like I'm dipping my toe so far into what it means to be a father. And there's a long way to go before I'm even up to like my waist. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, everyone says it's there's just so much to learn, right? But I just wonder if is it true the cliche, like you just change as a person, like just you, Jimmy?
Maybe. I mean,
maybe not.
If you don't change, maybe there's something wrong with you. That could be it too.
Yeah.
Because like there's a lot of pride before the fall in general, and having a kid is probably a humbling experience. Is one of the top things it is. It's just like very much you cannot deny reality in front of you sometimes. You know, one time I remember I was like holding the kid and just yelling, "Stop!" in like a really not cool way. And I had to like sit there and just be like, wow, I must look like a total idiot trying to tell a newborn to stop doing something like they could even understand why I was asking or what I wanted from them, and like me trying to control them too was like crazy. So there's always a bunch of those moments too, like changing diapers too. Like when you get peed on for the first time, you don't feel great, about yourself, but you're not going to get angry at the kid for it. That would be completely antithetical to what is actually happening. And so you constantly are entering those scenarios. And you're being humbled by the fact that your life is no longer your own. How do you deal with that? It's not, do you treat it as a loss, or is it actually something you've gained? I think a lot of like tiny decisions that you make with childhood can definitely compound over time. And so it's really important to just having a supportive partner is really important, probably more than anything else, because it's a team job. And then also seeing other people with kids has completely changed for me. Every time I see a baby in public, I'm like, oh my God, look, it's a baby. And then you look at the parents and you're like, oh my gosh, you're doing it. Like we're doing it. Yeah. Or you meet someone that has like a 10-year-old and you're like, oh wow, look at that one. Look at what happened. Whoa, maybe, oh, interesting. Like just 1,000 new questions too. And things. It's like when you see someone else's cat, you probably have a similar thing, right?
2,000%. Like I actually pay attention to other cats now. Like, yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to equate it to taking care of a human being, but
it's they call them starter childs for reasons, dogs and cats,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we love our cats, and I would die for my cats. So I can only imagine what it's like to have a human version of that.
The things I would die for in my life, my child is number one on that list. So
yeah,
and it's not even like something you even think about. Like I don't spend any time thinking about would I take a bullet for my baby. It's just like in your everyday action, you just have to do it. You just have to help. Yeah, there's nothing you would do in that moment that your life is somehow now more precious than theirs or whatever. And that's something too that was like a stereotype, but like you want your child to surpass you. I feel that 100%. And I never knew what that feeling was until you saw this and you're like, oh, I'm going to be dead at some point. And this thing ideally is still alive. And then they're going to have a kid that is also still alive when they're gone. And it's like, this, you're starting to, you're melting into the matrix of how humanity works. You're like, oh my gosh, this is it. This is the process.
Yeah. As you're saying that, I kind of just wanted to share a little bit. Like I've gone back and forth on this a lot, but I somehow now, even despite not having kids of my own, I'm sort of coming around to the fact that really the only meaning of life is to just pass on your DNA in the next generation. Like, because I've gone through so many phases of, what is the meaning? Like, why am I here? And life and death, blah, blah, blah. Like, woe is me or happy is me. But maybe that's really it, right? Maybe that's all there is to it,
I mean, life is like one long blink where you open your eyes and then you close it and you're dead. And then, depending on what you believe in, maybe a version of that opens its eyes once again to experience life in another facet. And so I think having children is genetically and just like as a species is what we are designed to do. It's what every species on the planet is literally designed to do. So you could equate it to meaning of life, but meaning of life is it's such a huge bucket of thing that maybe you can't fully just go like have kids. Maybe that's the purpose of life, but the meaning is what we carry along with it, I guess. Because I think a lot of people that don't have kids are contributing greatly to the world in that they are creating a world that's hopefully better and more less chaotic and more unified over time through their actions. And even though they may not have kids, maybe they will still exist again in the future as another part and thread of fabric of society, because you have parents and brothers and siblings and family that also are carrying yourself forward into the abyss of time and whatever infinity. So I don't know. Meaning of life is always a tough one, because I thought when I was a kid, my meaning of life was to be a better dad than my dad was. Like it was very like angsty teen status. Yeah. And then when you actually have kids, you're like, no, meaning of life is definitely to make them the greatest they can be so that they can have a great time and keep doing great things. And I don't care about me anymore. It's about them. It's like, so I think like I always had the intuition as myself to like want to push forward with something into father or whatever. But I think a lot of people also do that with their work, like I don't think Josh is planning on having kids because he has so many kids around him already, including everyone that works at Command Zone. So in a way, we are his family and his legacy and, through his work and what he wants to do through that. I think you see a lot of that across the world, not just in this scenario, but every country has versions of this.
Oh, no doubt. No
Also,
doubt.
not everyone can have a kid. That's like another big thing. Tons of people are stopped from having kids for any number of reasons. It's tough because having a kid is also just such a financial investment, time, emotional, mental, everything goes into it. So that is also something that I understand why people just don't want to give their own lives up for that.
But having said that, it's all worth it, at least from your perspective, right?
I mean, yeah, otherwise I would be sad, I think. And if it gets hard, I have to keep telling myself that too, because, you know, it's nice. The kids are cool. They're really cute. You film them all the time and you're like, oh, look at what they did. Look at that. That's so cool. Oh my gosh, what they did this time. Oh, they did this for the first time.
Yeah.
So I'm in that phase still for sure.
That's kind of how I feel why I want to have kids, because like after we have cats, it's kind of like I really want cats that I could talk to. I really want cats that can grow up one day and appreciate all the freaking things I've done for them, like take them across borders and, you know, pay out the wazoo for them.
Yeah, the cat is not going to be like,
kids,
thanks, Dad.
At least with kids, there's a shot that one day they would get it. You know, like Jimmy like did all this stuff. My dad did all this stuff for me. And that is coming from a very selfish place, I understand. But like I just can't not admit that, you know?
I mean, it's a very human thing to get validation for your actions. So kids, I think like too, I also want to have someone that can like ask me a question that makes me go, I have no idea. Because that to me is there's a whole world of knowledge that you can potentially learn by talking to them too. I don't know what that's like yet. And I'm sure there's going to be phases when they tell me whatever, Dad, and I hate everything about it. But I'm sure I hope the good times are enough to carry us through the rest of our lives.
You have to really step up your knowledge game, I think, once your kid starts asking you stuff, right? Because you can't just dismiss it all. So you
or get like, good at lying. I don't know.
Maybe I don't know. I'm not taking you for that kind of type, but it's like, you know, if they ask you for, you know, why is the Earth round? Like you gotta come prepared, or you gotta be able to Google at your fingertips. That's going to be a challenge, right?
Yeah, I guess. I also think it's like you also have to protect their innocence. I had one person that was a dad tell me that his son told him like, Dad, I know too much too soon. Like he was like
so
I mean,
self-aware.
maybe the kid is very self-aware, but it was also the dad was like, maybe I also kind of like brought him down this path for a long time of like, here's how this actually works. You want to know the truth about Santa? You know, like that sort of stuff.
All the spoiler alerts right here.
Yeah. So I think like there's that element too of like, how do you bridge that and make sure that you don't tell them everything that, in some information I wish I didn't need to know at certain points in my life. You know, there's definitely things that I thought maybe could have been broached better. So maybe that's the difficult part, is like, how do you approach the tough questions in a way that leads to good times?
Yeah. Do you ever, maybe this is just life, but it's like, you know, sometimes we go through life thinking like, I don't want to be like my dad. So I've definitely thought about that in the past. And then you kind of grow up and you realize that, hey, one day, like I am my dad. Like, is that magnified now that you're a parent, or not to make light of it? But...
I'm 50% my dad, 50% my mom. And so is every single person living on planet Earth.
Yeah,
which I think is just fascinating to think about. And so people always like, oh, Mason, your baby looks just like you, Jimmy. I'm like, no, I think he looks just like my wife. And it's a constant like back and forth of not actually knowing, which I think is really funny. Actually, he just woke up from a nap, so I'm going to go grab him really fast.
Sure.
And deliver him to my wife.
Is everything okay with Mason?
Yeah, they're all jet lagged because they came back from Taiwan on Wednesday. They spent a little extra time in Asia.
Oh, okay. Do you have
No, they just had friends and stuff there, and like they had, so they just wanted to visit. And Taiwan's like a very easy place to have kids around and stuff because they got tons of areas and stuff for them. So she was with her sister.
Oh, excellent. Yeah.
Very chill.
Very, very cool. I was back in Taiwan in September. I was born in Taiwan, so it was nice. Yeah.
Everyone is a genetic version of their parents. They're like the combination of that. And that's, it's interesting because like, people will tell me that Mason looks like me. I think he looks like my wife. So I think it's going to be very hard, and maybe this is the whole parenting thing, to ever divorce myself from the fact that I know that that person is part of me, and they are like very deeply linked to everything that I am as well. Because there'll be moments when he's doing something and I'm like, I think I know what he's thinking. I think I know exactly what he's thinking and why he's thinking it. And I think I can only know that because he's genetically the same as me.
I'm curious, Jimmy, like how much of your musings on technology, internet, AI, these things have, like how much of it is influenced by being a father, I guess? Because I would imagine just, obviously you think about it, but also the fact that you're also thinking about what the future means for the next generation, right? I mean, how does that play into your thinking, if at all?
I mean, I just had a kid a year ago, and I've been online for like 20 years, so it's only really affecting it a teeny amount right now. I mean, it's a small part, but it's also the biggest part because it's the biggest life change I've had my whole life. So I think like I'm always trying to look at the macro scale of things. It's just like an addiction of mine to not think about microcosms of whatever, but to like do the whole zoom out experiment. There was this video, I remember pretty much everyone's seen it, where you like start on a sand pebble on the beach or a grain of sand, and then you zoom out and you keep going past Earth and you go through all the galaxies and the Milky Way and all this other stuff. And the whole point is like, look how small we are. So I'm always trying to do that, and having a kid helps a lot. And anytime I talk online, I used to be very wrapped up in the moment by moment controversy, day to day, what is the distraction and how are we reacting to it thing that social media exemplifies, obviously. And I think the further along the path of internet usage I've gone, the less interested I am in the minutia, because I've started to see how inconsequential it actually is, and how it, if anything, it blinds me to other important things I should be focusing on. And having a kid is probably the best example of like, avert your gaze. You have a child in front of you and they have a life that they're trying to live. How are you going to help them, along this path? So that I think is the most direct link I think I can make between my view of things online versus how having a child has sort of impacted it. Past that, it's just a matter of experience and years that has sort of formulated my opinion of it now.
It sounds like you formed that opinion before becoming a father. So like, was there a particular wake up call, or was there like certain moments that helped you develop that view that you have?
Probably the pandemic would be the one that was the most obvious to me, of like, wait a minute, if I'm just online the entire time, I really am no longer in control. I'm like ceding all my attention to an Instagram story or a Twitter thing or TikTok, which is like an endless road of infinity that you can never escape if you if you're not careful. And I saw it was also happening to a lot of other people, and I found myself pulled along all these different storylines on both sides of the political fence now, right? Like, yeah, maybe we should doubt this thing, or like maybe they are right, like maybe I'm wrong, like all of these things start to really just yank my attention cord all the time. And I think like the pandemic, it exacerbated it to the point where it was like, I'm feeling anxiety, whereas I never used to feel anxious. And and I'm looking at my screen time every day. It's like 8-9 hours on your phone. It's like, wow, that's crazy. And I've always been addicted to technology. I've always had an addictive personality. I used to play WoW obsessively and all this stuff. And all of those things I have quit at some point. Like I sold my World of Warcraft account. I got out of it entirely, even though I was heavy into it for years. And so I think like the internet, I'm feeling the same kind of like, oh no, what has happened? What have we become feeling? And maybe the one I like spoke about the most was, I remember when the Will Smith slap happened, and Chris Tucker or Chris Rock, whatever, it got smacked across the face at the Oscars. And meanwhile, a war was erupting in Ukraine. And I remember being like, wow, look at that. We went from all of our attention being divided about this war in Ukraine, which is the most complex thing ever, but everyone's trying to dumb it down into like very easy. Like, that's not how war works. Anyone that studied war knows it's more complex than how it's being presented right now. And then you have this slap that takes everyone's attention immediately away from that and onto this hyper focus for like 2 weeks. I was like, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Even if it's just completely random happenstance, it's still incredible watching the ping ponging of just attention from one thing to the next. And I think I was like, I can't find any footing on this. I can't even, I'm like afraid to tweet now, whereas I used to just meme tweet and do dumb things all the time. Now I'm like actively anxious and afraid to do something. And it's not me, it might be the environment. And I think it's like one of those situations where once the environment becomes so hostile and so one thing, or very like, increasingly faceted things of that thing, people definitely start losing their minds and not realizing they're in it as much too. It's like easy to be fully in something and not realize how volatile the environment is until you can actually extract yourself. And for me, I just deleted Twitter and Instagram from my phone and only use it when I'm at a computer and able to type in the thing. And as a result, my usage has gone down like probably like 10% of what it originally was. But I also feel much better, and I'm able to focus more time on my kid, on myself, where I need to grow, and all those sorts of things. So I think the pandemic really was when I was starting to lose my head a little bit. And then obviously I have my wife there to also be a gauge of reality for me and my other friends. And I watched the Magic community melt down like 70 times in the period of 2 years. And I'm like, I just can't keep up with that amount of energy about everything. I'm going to lose my mind. And I was slowly. So I just started to very slowly back away. And now I feel like I'm in a much healthier place. But there are still times when I find myself in a Twitter rabbit hole and I'm just going deeper on something. And it's like almost like I'm like punching myself the whole time while I do it.
Yeah, you said something that really resonates with me. It's like when you leave WoW in your case, or EverQuest in Josh's case, or there are certain things where, because you guys talked about that, that was a big turning point where you were addicted to these things and it wasn't super productive. But then like social media is kind of this thing where you can always rationalize it as being of value. You can always rationalize it as being part of my job. It's part of like who I am as a personality or a creator or whatever. Like I need it, right? I needs it. So you can always justify spending more time. It's actually harder to just rationalize spending less time on it. So we were never taught this, right? Because I'm sort of in the same age group as you. Like I remember the days of GeoCities and MySpace, and when I first had ICQ in high school, we didn't have this shit. Like nobody, like James in the 90s never thought James in 2023 would be like, I'm gonna wake up and check Twitter every day, and like our brains just weren't configured for this. Like there's no regulatory thing, right?
No regulation about how many tweets you should be able to read every day.
Absolutely not. Like we were never trained in school to like learn how to invest, and we were never trained in school, how to like be mentally aware, or how to not like fall prey to these things. Like it's just so hard, right? And especially when you can rationalize it.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think the rationalizing it thing, and people got angry at me when I was like lashing out against social media on social media. And they have a point, obviously, that like, didn't your career succeed because of this? Are you allowed to say these things now? And it's interesting because even allowing that argument to happen and me going like, they have a point, is one of the dangers of having the platform exist in the first place, is because you can rationalize things, and it's kind of a meme too. There's the whole like response of like, I ain't reading all that. I'm happy for you though, or sorry that happened. Yeah. It's like becoming a mockery of itself in a lot of ways. I always describe social media as like a place where you can walk into a room and everyone's screaming at you, the wall is purple, and you can look at the wall and it's not purple, but you have no choice but to accept the reality that they are presenting, and you don't have control over that in the immediate conversation.
Or you say it's green and there's retaliation, so you also have to.
Yeah, or if you say it's green, all of a sudden you didn't realize it, but there's a whole army of green haters behind you that are so angry that you would ever say that wall is green because of all the things it means and all the history it's attached to. And so it's like we've like created a perfect little war ground for ourselves, and the goal is status and numbers and influence and however else you want to describe it. There's a great article by someone named Eugene Wei called Status as a Service. And it talks about how humans are status wired, and just like monkeys, right? Knowing someone is above you, knowing someone's below you is enough to create momentum and drive or whatever else. And social media platforms create status as one of their primary services. You make a viral tweet, all of a sudden you have people that follow you that create a status around you and your humor. Your Instagram, your status is your hotness, your body, whatever it is, your travel ability, whatever you're flexing. And I think having status games is great, but Twitter, Instagram, and all the social media really represent, like, it's a box still that you can only achieve. I mean, sure, you can infinitely get followers on Twitter or whatever, but it doesn't actually contribute meaningfully at the end of the day to anything. I would even argue that, like, after seeing how Trump took the status of president as a tweeter and took that to its absolute limits, that it has actually shown, if anything, the worthlessness of a tweet. That you can say anything.
It's really devalued, right? And now with Elon and certain characters.
Maybe not devalued, but rather shown its actual value. And that all the value it had given to it before is what we had propped up for it in the absence of never having something like this around before, and just implicitly trusting that it was the go-to, or it actually made a difference, right? Like, we haven't done any studies to prove that, really, outside of, like, sure, you can get a lot of people to retweet and agree with something, but does that create actionable change, or is it awareness driven and it's actually creating these more worse and like resentful parts of it to fuel that thing, that end goal?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you said it right. You're right on the money about, like, the disproportionate reaction to things, right? Like, you mentioned Will Smith versus war. I had this thing come
literal
up,
war.
I had this thing come up in Humans of Magic where I worked super hard on an episode last year, and it was about, covering the Ukrainian Magic community as the war was happening, and I spent a ton of time on it, and I was so proud of that work that I did. I interviewed like 10, 20 people on the ground in Ukraine who play Magic, but it was really a larger narrative about, like, what was it like to live through that. And then I did an episode where I talked to the owner of SCG, who was just, like, anti-vax. And it was like, somehow, like, the thing that I worked so hard on got, like, 1/10 of the reaction on the SCG episode. And sure, I guess, hashtag clout, like, I got, like, followers, listeners. That wasn't really why I did it. But I was totally caught off guard, but I wanted people to listen to the Ukrainian episode. But it's like,
that's not how it goes.
The internet
online.
does what the internet does, and I don't know if there was a lesson I learned, but it's just like a reminder. Like, man, this is really messed up,
Yeah, I mean, I think my lesson whenever I see clickbait or whatever work is, like, it is appealing to a different emotion in humans that is very profitable if you're gauging
outrage
profits by,
emotion,
like,
is the most
interaction.
profitable.
Yeah, outrage, resentment, vengeance. This person deserves something. How dare they? Like, all of these, even just feeling it as an actor, and you're saying these things, you're like, oh, they have this icky feel to them. It's more sharp. It's like driving a point in. It's not trying to spread love or add something. It's trying to take away something out of anger or whatever it is. So, like, that to me is, like, the flavor of the internet now. And maybe I'm just worried about flavors and vibes. That's why Japan's got its own flavor and vibe for all of you listeners from minute one. So,
we don't need a matcha flavor. We need an outrage flavor, or, like...
Yeah, we need outrage flavor. Well, we've got plenty of that. Just look anywhere. I do think resentment and envy are, like, those kinds of emotions, though, that are a dark part of what make up a lot of, human action. And it's something that is given a open breeding ground to fester and grow in strength when you go online, because there is just, again, no regulatory anything. No one is en masse going out and stopping resentment from driving the conversation. They're stopping bots. They're stopping scammers. Maybe they're stopping people impersonating other people or whatever. But you can't do that kind of thing without instantly getting into the, oh, this is why they banned Trump. This is why they banned this. Why are they allowing this speech to go? And then it quickly becomes a whole nother, right? It just gets distracted into an entire different argument, instead of being like, I'm creating a social media platform and we just do not allow for any amount of resentment. If our bot detects resentment in your messaging, it will kindly ask you to modify the message, or it will remove it. And that is on, a social platform could 100% do that. But why do that when that is literally the biggest driver of all the interaction that happens on the website?
Yeah, it's sort of against the commercial goals of the enterprise, as it were.
Yeah. Yeah. And unfortunately, profit-driven world, scale. Who's the next Uber? that's what's always going to be top of mind for sort of like this, we call it, it's the Web 2 versus Web 3 thing. That's what people are trying to hint at when they're figuring out this divide in what is the purpose of our data, and is it for other people to exploit and to market to, or is it something that we should actually own and have something, to do something with?
So what do you think is the what do you think, I guess I don't want to ask you like what needs to happen, but what do you think will happen? Like if we're being realistic, like what do you think happens? Like do these platforms implode? Do they start to fragment, as you have said in the past, through some observations? Like what do you think is going to happen? Are we going to have this for the next 100 years and just be worse, or what is it?
Have you ever seen or read why am I blanking? Foundation, Isaac Asimov? Yeah. So the idea behind that is that the scientist Harry what is his name? I can't blank on this. Foundation, Harry Seldon. He does something called psychohistory, which is like using mathematics and stuff to predict where things are going to happen. And this whole thing is like, we are about to enter a dark period of time, but instead of 20,000 years, we can make it 5,000 if we take the right preventative steps now. I always kind of, I'm a doomer kind of guy, and so I always kind of see things happening around me as that. It's like, we have a lot of problems in front of us, and at the current pace we're going and how we're treating it, we are in for even worse things. It's going to compound and be worse and worse unless we can make some very smart strategic moves and figure out how to dig ourselves out of this hole. It may still be bad. Human nature is not something we can just avoid entirely. We are still a continent of a world of many separate countries that all kind of hate each other. So we're still in that period of humanity. I think there's like levels. There's like some classification in sci-fi to the levels of humanity, and like level whatever is the world is fully united and able to travel into the rest of the universe as a united front.
Utopian. Yeah.
But even not if it's utopian, it's like a Avatar where just everyone in the world gets along. No one's going to go and try and murder another part of the world, or so there is some amount of unity around the world. We're so far from that point. Every country is so completely different, and they all have their own long histories that have not been able to meld into the overall consciousness or whatever yet. So I think that is how I see things. I don't know how bad things are going to get. I know that there's a lot we can do in the interim to fix for that and solve for that, but that doesn't mean it's going to stop being bad. Humans are, I just think, at a point still in our evolution where we're very far from the semblance of like a unified society, and we're in our teenager years or something, because that's what social media and drama and even now how I see a lot of people treat each other in day-to-day life and the TV we watch feels still very high school and teens in our sort of like our attitudes.
Yeah,
we ain't monks, that's for sure.
That is for damn sure.
We got monks,
yeah,
but we ain't monks.
Yeah. Am I being too optimistic, thinking that maybe one day people will just wake up and recognize that we're enslaved to our phones and just go back to the agrarian feature phone society? Is that just wishful thinking? I guess it is, right?
I think there's two ways it happens. One is you release a movie called The Matrix. Oh wait, that didn't work. Bummer. Okay, that option's off the table. The other is the sun explodes a giant solar flare that EMPs the whole planet, and we have no choice but to go back to our roots. Yeah,
I mean, you must have read or watched Watchmen, right? Like the original.
Oh yeah, I love Watchmen.
Novel. Basically, there's a storyline there, which is spoiler alert for someone who hasn't read the graphic novel, but it took humanity it took New York being demolished or the alien invasion that was created for humanity to actually come together. So that's why Ozymandias did that.
And it was manufactured.
And it was manufactured, right?
Exactly.
So it's there needs to be something probably on that scale. People to be maybe I should reevaluate what's going on. So
yeah, I agree. I love Watchmen. The new series on HBO as well is fantastic. If you haven't seen that yet,
phenomenal. It's easily probably the best TV show I've seen. Probably in the last 5 to 10 years, if I may use hyperbole.
Yeah, it's up there. It's like Breaking Bad is up there for me. That's up there for me. Last of Us is currently on its road to being up there for me.
Yeah. I'm going to plug Andor. Have you seen that?
Oh, incredible. It's what I wish Star Wars was for so many years.
Yeah. Yeah. That's actually the one thing I love about this podcast is that it was actually BDM, Brian David Marshall, who recommended Andor to me as we were recording. And then, because I told him how burned out I was on Star Wars, and he was just like, you have to watch this show. And then he basically sold me like during the recording, like, this is why you need to watch it. And he's not wrong.
Love it.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm all about Andor. I think it's not perfect still. There's still some moments where I'm like, but I thought overall it's like, this is the tone we're going for. I think it's like, who is it? Tony Gilroy that did it?
Yes. That's showrunner. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Tony Gilroy he gets the pacing, right? Yeah. He gets the feeling and the pacing to make Star Wars feel cool and not like episodes 7 through 9.
Yeah. There's something great about having a self-contained story that is allowed to slow burn. I think that's the way I would describe it.
Yeah.
Like, it takes time.
And there is no world-ending threat too.
Yes.
That is a big helper. Yeah. Like, not needing to jam in a world-ending, universe-ending threat into every story allows you to tell more human stories. Who would have thunk it?
What are some things that you watch or like consume that you're like, maybe you want to recommend? Like, are there things that excite you right now in terms of just things in general? Like, it could be a YouTube, it could be a Netflix show, it could be a movie. I think you've been pretty high.
Game Nights, man, what a great show. Everyone should watch Game Nights.
Revolutionary.
Nights with a K.
Yes.
Revolutionary. Broke the barriers of the industry.
What is it like to be like the grandfather of this entire genre, like, of Commander gameplay and podcasting? Like, just being the OG, like, what does it feel like to be that?
Yeah, maybe we're at grandfather status. It's cool. I mean, I have to give so much credit to Josh, though, because I'm very good. I know my skill. I know my ability to, charisma, fun, whatever you want to say, like, easy to listen to and all that stuff. And Josh and I have a very specific back and forth as well that we've honed over 8 years. But I think the polish is what really created Game Nights into what it became. And without that polish, it would not have had as much of an impact. Because I think humans, when we see something that feels like it could be on TV or in a movie or whatever, like, it has that level of, like talk to any Warhammer fan about the fan-made CGI films that this one guy's done. Is now being hired by the company to make it. Similar things. Because it felt so good and so real and so accurate to what was happening to the Warhammer world. I think Game Nights does a great job of that. And Josh, being a trailer editor, was very good at being able to hone in exactly on how to present something in that very easy to digest and entertaining way. And learn how to turn the knobs up on certain things and turn the knobs down on other things, which is where I think a lot of the anger about Game Nights comes from, which is like, they took away this and that and this and that and replaced it with this and that. I don't like this and that. And I think the this and that they don't like is actually why the show is massively successful and has brought in people like Post Malone and Joe Manganiello to want to be a part of it. Is because you don't get to that inbox without providing a certain level of quality that passes a bar. Now, if you go back on Posty's life, he has hung out in Minecraft houses and he's down to jam with just the gnarliest of gnarly, right? But I think the shine and sheen of Game Nights brought a new level of like, wow, Commander is epic in so many different ways. Outside of just the fun social environment, it's also the plays and all that stuff. And so I think Game Nights, if it does anything really well, is it helps turn up the knob on that epic feel and that like, holy moly, can't believe that just happened quality of multiplayer gameplay that everyone wants to have in their playgroup to some degree.
How does it feel to actually shape the trajectory of Magic the Gathering?
Great. So great. I got 0 stocks. I was hoping I would get a check in the mail from Wizards or Hasbro that was like, here's your stock certificate for creating Commander into what it is now. But it would also be very selfish of me to say that because it's not just me that's made Commander into what it is. It's kind of funny thinking that like our criticisms or our critiques of like make white do this more or fix red have turned into what they've become, because it's almost like the monkey's paw where the finger curls and all of a sudden treasures exist. And it's like, wait a minute, did we ask for this? Kind of, not really. Oh no. So I try not to think that I actually have that much influence. I assume that the game designers are very ahead of us in terms of understanding why the game doesn't work, and that they've already been on the path that we've shown a flashlight on maybe, but that path has been laid down. And I think, I don't doubt Magic's got probably the best design team in the world when it comes to gaming. And they have I've met all of them now, Gavin, Mark, all those people, Aaron, I've talked to them. I've like gotten inside their heads a little bit, and they're great at what they do. And that's what makes the game somewhat entertaining. So my influence, I think, is more that we brought people to the fact that this is the best board game in the world, and probably drove a lot of profit for WotC in that period of time. But at the end of it, I'm just glad that more people are able to connect through Magic, and it also creates an outlet for a lot of people that would not have a larger social group to connect with because of Magic in its infant, like old players, right? That Magic was small, niche, and not something that people knew about. I think there's a good funnel that goes both ways in helping sort of like bridge that gap for people, because it's very, I've met a lot of awkward Magic players, just to tell you the truth, and it's good to have outlets where we can practice how to be social and how to enjoy time with other people and create a positive play group or whatever it is. And that to me is like the real takeaway from the whole board game D&D Critical Role game nights revolution that's happened over the past 8 years.
I respect your answer a lot. It's a very humble answer. I wanted you to be like a lot more like, yeah, man, I created Commander,
resentment, here we go.
Resentment, outrage, I don't know, all the different spectrum of complex emotions. But
I felt all of them, to be fair. I've been, there was one point, I don't know if you saw this in when we did MagicCon Vegas, and we did the Game Nights live show. Something happened, I forget exactly what, but I stood up indignant from my chair because people were booing me over something. And I screamed at them like, I've made content for you for 8 years straight and asked for nothing.
Are you not entertained? This is not why we're here.
But that's why I think Worldwide Wrestling exists, WWE and all that stuff, and AEWs, because you're able to emit that persona in a safe way. Mm-hmm. If I'm just unhinged out here, like ranting about people, I don't think I could feel good about myself later on in life.
I think there's also something unique in your situation in that you achieved a level of fame like before game nights, and I think that probably allows you to be a little bit more level-headed,
detached.
Right? Yeah. You've seen a level of success or fame, whatever you want to call it, before game nights, so I think it allows you to keep a little bit more of a level head, because I've seen a lot of people maybe go viral or famous too fast, and it just goes with the whole thing about like our lizard brain can't deal with that shit. So it's just like they just self-combust, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think Twitter does a very good job of reducing people to their animalistic nature. Look at like what has happened to Kanye, Elon, Tate, any of like even the major politicians, right, have all been humiliated by what pressure Twitter brings on them almost. And it's of their own doing a lot of times. It's like pure hubris. Yeah. Like we saw it this year happen with like the Try Guys with Ned. Like that was just a complete fall from grace from the pressures of whatever this industry is eliciting out of people. But yeah, I have been around the block a couple of times. Very few of us online now have been. And I think all those old recognizes old online, which is like 10 years old at this point. But I always reference like Wong Fu Productions and Ryan Higa and Kev Jumba and that entire generation of YouTube creator, because that's sort of when I really started. And that was 12 years ago now. And we all had our own levels of fame and relevance, or whatever you want to call it. And even I'm, if anything, if you're going to catch like a weird side of me, it's my jaded side, which doesn't believe people should become actors, which isn't that excited about Shang-Chi, because what is Shang-Chi? It's just another kung fu master. Like that part of me is very much still in that realm of entertainment is evil. But I've been a willing participant, and I've benefited from the construct many times over. So that's, if anything, the thing I struggle with, and the thing I think about all the time is like, am I actually happy doing what I'm doing? Or did I just follow this road and I'm at where I'm at, but it doesn't mean I have to stay here?
In terms of happiness, are you happy with Command Zone game nights? Like, do you feel like you guys are kind of doing it? Because like I know that both you and Josh have been public saying, we'll need to evolve, right? Like, so yeah. I guess it's kind of like a two-part question. Like, where do you think this sort of content is going, and how do you see yourself like playing a part in the future of it?
Yeah, I think the constant evolution and getting better part is really important. That's a lesson I learned very much from Josh, having worked with him now for 8 years or whatever. And I think that is something we're still growing, I think, as a channel in a lot of ways. And it would be an absolute mistake for us to get caught up in our current criticism because we're enveloped in criticism of WotC at the same time, because we work with them as one of our partners. And I think that is something that we're coming to sort of grow as a company and understand. Because when we first started, our jobs were not possible because WotC didn't sponsor us to the degree that it does now, right? Like in terms of giving us the budget to make game nights is really where it all started. And then from there, we're like, hey, maybe we can do some ad spots, maybe we can do some other things. And the relationship grew. We're still maturing as a company, I think. And one of the things a company that matures has to do is understand its relation to the companies it's working with. It was very much a one-directional thing at first. WotC was like, cool, we love game nights. Here's a small budget to make it every year. And then we worked on that budget and it made it more workable and able to hire more people and work under the same house. And now it's getting to the point where I think we have to start thinking about ourselves as the source, and people are lucky to work with us. And game companies should want to work with us, or commercial companies, or to make their commercials or ads or whatever. And that way, the relationship becomes more like we are now the dealer of the thing because we've been practicing it and making it for a long time. And we can grow larger as a company and do more cool, awesome things that are truer and truer to what our heart's passions and desires are. But it has to start from sort of like growing past that one-way relationship originally. Because now maybe we're a company that sustains a WotC-like relationship with multiple companies. And for our own stuff as well, we're a real production house now. Like I think that's the level that we're trying to work on right now. And I think Josh may have mentioned it, but we're moving into a new studio in Burbank, and we're trying to level up things in different ways, and also professionally. Like we got to treat things with, we have to actually have our taxes sorted out, our adult stuff, our administrative stuff. How do we work as a company? The RACI matrices and all that stuff. Like those are all the questions that are starting to really formulate now as we grow beyond like a 20-person company.
Is it still fun for you?
Oh, definitely. I think all of it's fun because it means I get to work with people I really like.
How do you feel about Commander content in general? Like we had talked about how you guys are the originators of it, but there's this whole market around it now, right? Everybody's playing webcam EDH every day or every minute, every hour. Yeah,
the pandemic definitely helped people make content. I think that was a nice part about it, is that made people do their spell table setups and stuff, which is pretty sweet.
Do you see that just continuing the way it is, or do you think Magic content is going to evolve again into something different?
Interesting. Magic's so based around the game that it's hard to think about it evolving. And I mean, look at like League of Legends, for example. It is probably the biggest game in the world by a lot of metrics, or at least one of top 5, top 10 easily. And if you look at the content scene around that, I was really heavily involved in it, actually. In its early days, I was a host for a show called All Chat, which was like our community fan service show where we would show cosplayers and go to events and go to meetups and film it and sort of like do a fun world around what is, the community feeling and what are they passionate about? What are the things that we want to discuss as a show? And that was like one facet of Riot's content at that time. And there was a decent scene around that as well about people making their own cosplay content or starting their own channels or whatever as a result. And you watch it all sort of flourish for a bit. And since then, it's died down a bit. And League content, I think, is more focused around the esports side of it, as well as like the championships and the teams and the esports orgs that make it up. And it was only until Arcane that it put like a big fist through the idea of what can content around this game mean. And Arcane is a game changer for a billion different reasons, in the same way that Spider-Verse was. But I think that's, to me, like really indicative of what Magic has in front of it too, which is like there is a limit to the point where you can do things with the game that are interesting, because you just don't see people playing League as content really, unless they're streaming. And Magic is like, we've created this show, this way to digest it in a sit-down packaged format. I don't actually know what's past that for Magic. It seems difficult for my brain to wrap itself around an idea that I myself would want to sit down and watch and be like, wow, this is great Magic content. Because everything else is kind of there. We got deck tutorials, reviews, discussions. You've got different flavors of Commander shows. You have so much content that's around the game that feels like that is its own engine. And I don't know what you can inject into it that makes everyone go, holy crap, we didn't know this existed and we need it.
So maybe
I just can't think of it.
Yeah, maybe short of the game itself actually evolving or something, like it's very hard for us to go past it, right? Because
there's like an esports angle you could take. Maybe the Pro Tour gets so big that something could go happen there. Magic had a show that they've been sort of delaying post Arcane because it's a lot to live up to, and that could be something that opens the doors to more types of Magic content. You could also see cosplaying maybe take a nationwide, worldwide rise in prominence, and Magic cosplayers, in the same way that Magic art is at the top of fantasy, is also Magic cosplay is also now at the top of cosplay or whatever. But that's, there's a lot to do there.
Jimmy, what's the best place for people to find you on social, or where you would like to be found?
Don't find me on social.
Don't find you. Yeah.
Nah, you can follow me. It's JFWONG on most things.
Okay.
So Twitter, Instagram, all that stuff. I'm not super active on Instagram anymore, but Twitter is just like me musing if I decide to muse. And giveaways. If you like some giveaways, I'm doing some giveaways in March. I don't know when this is coming out, so.
I'm going to try to make sure it comes out fairly soon for your birthday. So
That's right.
There's a little fun fact, which is totally inconsequential to anything. But I found out through my research that our birthdays are just one day apart. I think.
Really? What's your birthday?
It's March 27th.
Wow. Look at you, Aries.
Yes.
Doing it.
You are also an Aries if you're one day different from what I am.
It is correct.
Yes.
It is correct.
Yes.
I am.
Yeah.
I am an Aries. Yeah, that's awesome. Happy birthday soon. That's great.
Happy birthday
March
soon to you as well, Jimmy.
Yeah, March is a great month. We're at the beginning of the year. We're not like somewhere in the summer. You can still celebrate it during the school year.
All right, Jimmy, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me, and it was a pleasure.
All right, great to talk as well. Thanks, James, for having me on.